everybody, and welcome to today's special episode of Distilling Greatness. Today, I've got three wonderful guests, and I'm going to let introduce themselves. But I'm Jeff Arnett. I'm the founder, master distiller at Company Distilling. And today, we're coming to you from our Thompson station, distillery just south of Franklin, south of Nashville. If you've not been here and you're in the Nashville area, I'd love to have you come down here. We make all of our Ghost Rail gin here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about gin, even though these guys are into bourbon. Anyway, so today our guests are coming to us from Murfreesboro. They are the Boro Club. So the Boro Club is Murfreesboro's original and oldest bourbon and whiskey club, where enthusiasts of all experience levels get to come together, meet, share, and enjoy good bourbon. They're an inclusive group supporting community events. They're dedicated to celebrating the rich traditions and exciting innovations in the world of whiskey. So pour yourself a glass, sit back, and join us for this conversation and with these passionate members of the Boro Bourbon Club. But gentlemen, thank you guys for coming. If you would, take an opportunity to introduce yourselves so everybody will know who you are.
Absolutely. I'm Chad Lane. I am the founder of the Boro Bourbon Club.
And my name is Bryan Nale, and I'm one of the admins of the club.
Okay.
And I'm John Kelley, and I'm also one of the admins of the club.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's the leader, and then there's everybody else admin. Is this?
Yeah,
I'm sensing there's like a theme. It's like y'all do what I tell y'all to do.
No,
You know, I'm
not at
gonna
all.
make all the decisions, and y'all go do it.
Not at all. The opposite.
It's fun because sometimes Chad will get a hair and we'll be like, Chad, back down.
Yeah.
You know, I think maybe whiskey and bourbon clubs weren't necessarily that common up until maybe around 2010. That's where I really began to see them emerge. So I'm not really sure when you guys were founded. We'll give you a chance to talk about that. But I do give clubs like y'all's a lot of credit. I think it kind of got past maybe people's reluctance or not knowing, or I always say that, you know, if you ever meet a wine sommelier, they'll convince you not to order wine because you don't want to look stupid.
Right.
You know, I think part of bourbon clubs are about simplifying the process. You know, it's like find one you like.
Right.
And, you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder here. But, you know, if you want to, you know, be smarter about what you're going and spending your money on in the stores, here are some people that have probably spent a lot of money before you, and they'll start to introduce you to brands that maybe are noteworthy and that you should look to. So if somebody comes and joins the Boro Club, kind of how do y'all indoctrinate them in? What sort of that introduction look like, and what are some of the initial pieces of advice that you offer your new members?
Yeah, so, you know, typically, of course, the group is essentially formed on Facebook. That's where we originated from, created in 2019. But, you know, we have people that join the club all the time. We've got a few questions we ask them on the front end. We try to keep it local. You know, you'll find members in our group that are really tied to Murfreesboro mainly, but they branch out into all of Middle Tennessee. So, you know, a lot of times we just ask for them to help support the club, and that's, you know, by way of maybe buying some of our bottles as we do barrel picks, and really just to come in and enjoy and learn. I mean, the group was started to bring enthusiasts together of all experience levels, and that's going to be the goal going forward. So I think, you know, we just want them to come in. We want them to, you know, enjoy, ask questions, you know, follow what people are posting, and yeah.
Are there particular stores that y'all have partnered with on y'all's barrel picks, or do you rotate that around? Or, you know, if people are looking to find something from the Boro Bourbon Club, to find one of y'all's recommendations, how would they know where to go and what to do there?
Yeah.
Really, from the Facebook post, we don't partner with any one specific store exclusively. There's a lot of great liquor stores and shops in Murfreesboro, a lot of great bottle shops that you can go to and get good stuff. Whether it's one of our picks or not. So we like to spread it around. But anytime we're doing a pick, it's going to be just, hey, this is where this one is. So go find it.
Okay.
Yeah. We want people to support, you know, local brick and mortars. You know, keep it as local as we can, and support those businesses. And we kind of feel like it's, you know, they support us, we support them.
Yeah.
And let me add to that, because I think it's important to note, while we don't work with one store necessarily, we definitely have strong relationships with, you know, a lot of the stores in the area. So, and they know that. They'll reach out to us and say, hey, you know, come help us out.
I've got my allocations in.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to put them on the shelf until you come by and see me, right? Yeah, that's a good store.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that recognize who their loyal customers are, and then give them that type of special treatment, because you should. I mean, honestly, it's, you know, somebody who doesn't spend a lot of money in a store probably shouldn't get first dibs on something that they're only going to get a handful of bottles in a year.
Absolutely.
You know, I've kind of, people have asked me, you got some big stores like Total Wine. They have 2 stores in Tennessee. Their approach is very different to selling. They tend to try to sell on price, and they have their store brands. But to me, that will never replace the hand selling that goes on with some of the smaller stores. And Tennessee is really fortunate to kind of have some of these laws, I think, where you have, no more than 2 stores, which kind of forces you to get to be more intimate with your customer. Know them by face, greet them when they walk in, already know what they like. Let them know anything special that you've got. So it's kind of changed the market, to get some of these big category killer type stores in, and they have their place.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not opposed to them. They're one of our biggest accounts for company, so we sell a lot of bottles there, and I'm appreciative of them. But it's more important. People get to know your brand a lot better in some of these smaller stores.
Sure.
Especially,
absolutely.
finding, like, we got big category, or multi-outlet stores in Texas. Then we've got one that has just a few. And they're the ones who got the most traction with company. It was because of the store. People liked it.
Right.
When they got it in, they knew a little bit about my background, said, hey, let's order some of that in. All the store tasted. They're like, we like this. So they went from ordering a case to 6 cases to 10 cases to doing a custom blend, 30 case order for their store. Got some cask strength in. One of the few stores I've ever allowed that to leave the distillery for. But yeah, it's amazing how much a store can lift your brand.
Well, I know
for you.
as a consumer, I've had some of my favorite bottles that I've enjoyed have been something that I probably would have just walked past and not picked it up. But the people at the shop knew me, and they knew what I kind of gravitated to, and said, hey, you should try this. And then a lot of them will have a bottle open so you can try it right there in the store and decide if you want to enjoy it you're going to enjoy it before you buy it.
Yeah. So the fact that you guys were founded in 2019 actually kind of put y'all a little bit ahead of the whole COVID thing. That I know I've met quite a few clubs that founded during COVID because it became a way for people to get online together, to talk, common hobbies and interests and things of that nature. Very important way of staying connected, when a lot of our society norms were kind of broken. But was that something that you guys did? Was that one of the things that y'all were kind of connecting through, like Teams meetings or things of that nature?
It's funny because no, I mean, it eventually grew to that, right? But it was like one day I just said, there's nothing around here that connects the bourbon neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it was just, I had no intentions. I had no expectations by any means. It was just like, let me start a little group and see what happens. We bring some people together. Great. I had met, John actually lives in my neighborhood, and I had met him and already kind of, found out I've got a bourbon friend here in the area.
A bourbon bro.
And a bourbon bro. And so started it, and it just grew. And it was funny because from that time on, I was like, okay, this thing's growing, started out 100 people, and now we're at 1,600.
Oh, wow.
But it's like, okay, now I've got to find something to do, right? We've got to engage the people and make it cool. So we started doing virtual tastings through COVID with distilleries and just kind of growing from that. So
That was
Go ahead.
Yeah,
So
that's a huge club. I mean, wow. Yeah. And just in 5 years, you've gone from a handful of people up to 1,600. Of course, I got a chance to meet you guys here just a few months ago when y'all were out touring several distilleries, and I think maybe 20, we had at least a couple of dozen with you guys, and
25, I think.
very diverse, young, old, men, women, everything. So yeah, kudos to you guys for being able to attract in a big group of people like that.
thank you.
those early days. I mean, we founded in 2019, and we all know 2020 it hit pretty quick. But I remember Chad getting these just boxes of samples in from distilleries that would come on and do a virtual tasting with us. So you'd be in your house with a Glencairn, and sampling 3 or 4 different samples from some of these awesome distilleries that we were just like, I can't believe these folks are doing this for us. But they were probably like, how cool is it for us to have an opportunity to tell our brand story when we don't have visitors coming into our shops right now?
Oh yeah.
And one of the neat things I remember was, and I can't remember if it was Nelson Greenbrier out of Nashville or if it was Chattanooga, but they did a virtual walkthrough of their facility with us as we were doing the virtual tasting. And so it was kind of like we were doing a virtual tour. Was it Chattanooga?
Yeah, it was.
We were doing a virtual tour and walking through. It was, I thought out of COVID, that was really a neat experience
I think
that we had.
Yeah, it kind of helped. Just kind of, Chad said, we had to have events. We had to have something to engage with the people. Otherwise, what are we really? And that was really innovative of Chad to come up with that idea of
I think whether, Nelson's not really an old brand. I think been around less than 10 years. We've been around just a few years. But even I think brands like Jack Daniel's been around since the 1860s. You're looking for ways to create relationships with your consumers. That was for Jack Daniel's, that was the Squire program. I was a member of that.
Yeah.
So before I ever went to work there, I was proud to, tell people I was from Tennessee. I felt like it was one of the most notable products. I would, as I got older, I would prefer to drink whiskey over beer. But you're looking for ways to have authentic relationships with people and get to know people and to make them feel like that they're, part of your brand in a way. So if you're a Squire, of course, you get a whole different experience if you go to Lynchburg. You have a house that you'll go to. There's, gifts and things that say Tennessee Squires Association that kind of make you feel special.
I've got my square inch plot.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What are they growing on it these days? I haven't gotten a letter in a while.
Yeah.
But of course, you're not supposed to work in the distilled spirits industry to be a Squire. But if you're just a consumer enthusiast, that's kind of what it was meant to be. But I think those types of things are important. So is there a brand, you said, Nelson's did a virtual walkthrough of the facility during COVID. What are some things that brands have done for your club that you felt like were really just, over the top, nice things to do? I mean, part of this, selfishly, I'd like to know what they're doing because I might try to do it myself. So give me some pointers here. What are things that have made you really warm up to a brand?
Things that are right on the top of my head was Hard Truth. We went up and did a tour with them and did a barrel pick with them, and they've got an Airbnb. I don't know if it's public as far as anybody can rent it, but they brought us on property. They fed us. They toured us, and then we were able to stay on property and spend the night there, and that was a really unique experience. Aaron with Smoke Wagon, he's done multiple virtual tastings with us. He's also donated, which we'll get into later on as far as the nonprofit that we support. He's donated to that as well, with some unique and special bottles. But it does kind of, let you see behind the curtain a little bit, to where when you have a personal relationship with the people behind the brand, it does make you want to support them. Because it's more than just looking at a bottle or, thinking about it being a big company, and you start to see the people behind it, which we all want to get behind and help support.
And I think it's important that for a time, Jack Daniel's could be seen as some big behemoth, and it is a very large brand. But you can make it much more personal, give it a face and a voice. And I was honored, to be able to be that for them for, at least 12 years of my life. And now to be able to kind of take some of the learnings that I had there and what consumers want and what they like and what they respond to, and hopefully design something at Company that's never going to be the scale of Jack Daniel's. But hopefully people who are fans of Jack Daniel's for certain reasons will find that there's some common elements of the way we build our brand and the character of the people that we hire. That one of the things that always struck me about Jack Daniel's is that even a bad day in Lynchburg was still a pretty good day. You knew everybody there was in it to win it. They had your back. If things got, if something got messy, everybody was going to roll up their sleeves to get it done. Everybody would wear shirts, Jack Daniel's shirts, to work. They would go home, shower, clean up if they needed to, and they put on their clean Jack Daniel's shirts and then kind of go to town. They wore that brand everywhere because they were super proud of it. And I feel like, there's a lot to be said for that. That hasn't been by happenstance that's been created. So I think, I look and admire so much of what Jack Daniel's been able to do, that as a large brand has had these intimate connections and done their best to try to stay small in so many regards.
Yeah. Jeff, I want to ask you actually with your history with Jack and knowing the growth, and the impact that you made on the different products that you kind of brought in. What do you, looking now with Company, like what's in your vision? What's in the future for what you plan to expand on there?
I was blessed to be at Jack Daniel's in the time that I was there because, the first 6 master distillers that had been named before me created 3 products between them, but it was kind of like the cuffs came off a little bit. So I was able to create another 8 products over about a 10-year period, everything from flavored spirits to new barrel technologies to new grain bills. Hadn't done a new grain bill since Prohibition. So that was awesome. One of the side things that we were doing for the Distiller series, so those little small lab-like labeled bottles that you'll get only at the distillery or just in the state of Tennessee, we were kind of exploring some wood finishes. So we did a hickory finish for the 30th anniversary of the barbecue, that charred hickory wood, and it was like Jack Daniel's with a touch of bacon in it. It was kind of crazy that I would take something as identifiable as Jack Daniel's and bend it with using a natural means to do it. So we did that. We did like the Jamaican allspice wood. We did pecan wood. We started kind of doing these non-traditional woods that go beyond white oak or a wine cask as a natural way to kind of take a spirit and bend it kind of playfully. unfortunately, none of those I thought were going to be million case ideas. And when you're Jack Daniels, that's what you're looking for. You need to, you're looking for the next million cases because if you're going to grow 6 or 7%, that's what it means
Sure.
to do that annually. So if you're kind of look at your competitive set, being a 15 million case brand, to grow 6 or 7%, that's a million cases. And that's larger than some well-known brands. You have to grow that in a year.
Yeah.
So of all the things that I ever did at Jack Daniels, honey was the only thing that eclipsed the million case mark. But it was not the thing I was most proud of, at the same time.
We were
but it's good.
Just talking. I mean, we feel like you kicked off the honey excitement from that point, because now you see honey everywhere.
I had to have some encouragement to do that one, because that was really not what I wanted my legacy to be there. But it was very successful, and I thought it brought a new drinker to Jack Daniels. So if you're not a black label drinker today at Jack Daniels, maybe honey's your starting point, but hopefully that grows you into a gentleman Jack or a black label. So I always say putting one more rung on the ladder is not a bad thing if it gets them with your brand. So I kind of looked at it through that lens. But leaving Jack Daniels, it wasn't about trying to do flavored spirits so much. Even though I've done that, we've got an Ace Gap brand. I distance it from what we're doing in the whiskey space. I want the company name to kind of have a little bit of a quality halo around it, and I want it to be defined by wood finishes and going into some very non-traditional types of woods that may not have been used in whiskey before, but are native to Tennessee. That's the other thing. And that's not to say I wouldn't go outside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park to find some obscure wood to work with if I think it's really unique and creates a great spirit. But
Sure.
I feel like, whiskeys at their core are very, they're kind of tied to geography. So whiskey can be made on any, continent on the planet, but they tend to be derived from natural sources. So Scotch whiskey, it's going to be different. They grow malted barley there. They use pot stills. They reuse bourbon barrels because they don't have white oak. So they're kind of left to reuse the barrels that come from America, but America's got a different grain set. So you see, corn and rye and things of that nature kind of coming into the mix there. But I like the thought of using what Mother Nature provides in the state of Tennessee to build a notable Tennessee brand that kind of is known for innovation in that wood finishing area. So we've done apple wood, we've done cherry wood, we've done maple wood. I had a little bit of experience with each of those woods at Jack Daniels, at least on a assessment basis. And right as I left Jack Daniels, I didn't do anything for company until I didn't have a non-compete, but I didn't want to do anything tangibly towards our brand until I was out of there, just out of respect.
Right.
But one of the first things I did was, of course, getting to work with liquids beyond Jack Daniels. I knew certain grain bills, high rise and full rise, and things that Jack Daniels wasn't necessarily known for. And I started laying down matrices of woods on that to say, hey, which wood pairs with which grain? Where are the synergies? Where's the complements of character that are created? And then let that inform what we do going forward. I knew the sweeter a liquid would be, applewood's a good call. The more peppery and spicy it is, more rye-driven, cherrywood's the better call. Maple's a good middle of the road. And I wanted to have a portfolio. It took me a while to get to 3 bottles on the shelf, but I think, if you don't like our bourbon, then hopefully either the Applewood Tennessee whiskey or the Cherrywood Rye is going to do it for you. And then over time, continue to grow that as we assess different finishes.
Awesome.
You talk about the rye that you make, and and a lot of people who don't traditionally like ryes will gravitate to yours and say, hey, this is actually pretty good. What do you think makes your rye stand apart from those?
Yeah, so, one of the things that we did, I got to help design the rye for Jack Daniels, and there were a lot of 51% ryes and 95% ryes. There wasn't a lot in the middle. Of as far as the rye content. So we chose 70% for Jack Daniels because we felt like it was sort of a unique inflection point of character. It left enough corn in it that that yeast culture of Jack Daniels kind of has a tendency to create a little bit of a banana note. And it actually, I think, elevates it a little bit. When the rye is in the fermenter, it smells like banana splits are being made in the distillery there.
I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It was like you could almost like walk through, and all of a sudden it's like there's a rye in here somewhere. I could smell it because it smells like people are like cooking bananas, like bananas Foster in there. So, but yeah, so when we were selecting a rye, I wanted one. I don't tend to drink rye a lot, and it's not that I dislike them. I prefer sort of the sweet vanilla bourbon barrel notes to the peppery spicy notes that I often will kind of assign to a rye, but. But I felt like, to have a full portfolio from company, we needed to have a solid rye in the mix. So I kind of nosed around. Of course, being a new brand, we're going to have to source anything, but trying to stay away from the usual suspects as we've done. We've gone to different states with different grain bills than what you typically see brands start up on. Found one that I thought was really cool because it was 100% rye. It was a 95% dark, like a pumpernickel rye. in a 5% malted rye. So it's actually 100% rye on the grain bill. And its inherent character was more mint and licorice driven than it was, full black pepper and spice. So I like that as a starting point. And when I dropped the cherry wood on it, it gave it sort of a dried fruit. It definitely showed up on it. So I'm like, hey, the balance of that character all the way through. So I've had people who don't like rye who've come to me and said, hey, man, your rye is just, I'm not a big rye person, but I had a chance to try it, and you put me on it. That's the only one I want. So I always, makes me feel good, that somebody who feels that way. But more importantly, I don't want to put anything out that I don't feel like is good. I would rather have nothing on the shelf than something that disappoints. And it took me a while to get to, a Tennessee product, that I was happy with. And I'll be patient to get what we want out there. But yeah, I think the rye turned out nice. It's a double platinum winner, gold winner this year. So yeah, doing really well among the people who like rye.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One of the things for me, because I get that a lot, where somebody will say I'm not a fan of rye, and my normal response is probably because you haven't had a good one. Because some of the ones that and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the younger ryes will pick up those peppery, spicier characteristics, maybe the grassy notes or the spearmint. But as they age in the wood, and some of the older ryes that I've tried and tasted, I get more of those. Probably imparting from the wood sugars, where you're picking up toffee, caramel, butterscotch, and they're delicious.
Yeah. So yeah, the older rye gets, the more bourbon-like it will become.
Okay.
Yeah. So the more, because they're very different distillates up front. Something that has, if rye is the predominant character off the still, you're going to know it. I can always tell a rye. If somebody pours me one, I don't have to even know the brand, but I'm like, that's either a full rye or a really high rye bourbon. Yeah. I've kind of done this experiment with some people before. It's like, helping them try to figure out their palate. I've taken differing grain bills from the same distillery and basically started to mix them so that I'm elevating the ultimate rye content in it. And what you would typically see is they'll hit a wall at some point of concentration in it. It's like, if I blend it down, if you're starting at a 20% rye, but you're using like a high corn and kind of blending that down, it's like, okay, here's 10%, here's 15, here's 20, here's 25. And it's like, well, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. This one I'm marginal on, but I don't like anything after that. And it's like, okay, there's your hard limit. You like rye, but only up to that point. Once it becomes the defining character, you're out.
Yeah.
So
is bourbon and rye similar? I like to think that it is, but like in cigars and wine, you have a lot of it's all about the terroir. So you can identify a cigar that you like based on the region that it's grown, or what's the components of that cigar is. Same thing with the wine. If you like a wine from Paso Robles or wine from Napa Valley, you can hone in on that. I like to think that you kind of can with bourbon too, and rye. If you if you dig in a little bit deeper and you find out what the mash bill is, you can kind of start rather than just walking into a store and have no clue of what to pick off the shelf. If you can kind of understand what you like, the components of it, is bourbon like that? Can you define it?
I think especially for so long, Kentucky, Tennessee kind of defined American whiskeys. Kentucky did bourbons, Jack and Dickel did the Tennessee whiskey thing, but very similar growing areas as far as where their grains are going to be sourced from. Assuming you're not going to go any further than you have to go to get the quality of grain you're looking for, you're going to be getting it out of Iowa, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee. You're going to be kind of pulling up your corn from there, and you're going to be high in corn, whether you're a Tennessee whiskey or a bourbon. Four seasons climate, limestone water. Finding good iron-free water sources in those early days would be critical, because if there was any iron in the water when you cut it off the still and put it in the barrel, it's going to turn it like a greenish black. There's like a reaction that happens there, so it won't develop that beautiful amber color. So you can actually ferment. Jack Daniel's wouldn't tell you this because they talk about the iron-free water that comes in from the cave spring. You can actually ferment with iron in the fermenter. It's not necessarily going to inhibit fermentation. It will change the fermentation because mineral content matters in the way the yeast are going to operate there. But you can ferment in iron water, but you certainly don't want it after you distill it. It becomes a detriment to it. But it's the Four Seasons climate that I think has so much to do with it. So now that you're seeing bourbons go, outside of Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, sort of this area that's done them historically, when you're seeing Texas and you're seeing people come from New York and you're seeing, people out in California even that are starting to, to get into it, their climates are very different. So the way they mature over half of your flavor, all of your color is going to be from the time you spin in the barrel. It's going to be that piece that I think really begins to create unique thumbprints of character based on where they're stored.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah. To me, that's the biggest thing. That Kentucky and Tennessee are very similar. The charcoal mellowing thing kind of separates it from a process. But if you look at every other regard, water, grains, 4 seasons, climate, it allows you to kind of keep those more similar than what you're going to see a deep Texas whiskey. A year down there, and it may already look like a 4 or 5 year old out of Kentucky. Because you go small barrels and things of that nature. And I'm not saying it'll look mature. It'll look more mature than it probably is, because the time in the barrel really doesn't need to be shortened. I'm not a big fan of these accelerated maturation programs that people are saying, like 3-day bourbon. And just because it looks like a bourbon in 3 days doesn't mean it's going to drink like one. It goes beyond it goes beyond just the color you can create in one, because you can artificially create color. You can infuse it almost. But there's still some settling and time that every spirit needs in a barrel if part of its character is the oxidation and the time in the barrel.
So where it's stored, climate, whether it's on the lake or the river or the ocean.
Some of that is for story. For
driving
sure.
across country.
Right.
But I would tell you, if you're and I actually met the Ingram guy when he was doing his master's work at Vanderbilt. He came down and talked to me at Jack Daniel's, and he asked me what I thought if he were to put barrels in a container and put it on a ship down the Mississippi or whatever, what that would do. And I'm like, well, if you're putting it in a container and it's holding 110, 120 degree, temperatures and stuff like that, that's going to make more of a difference than whether or not it was on the Mississippi or not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And sloshing it around in there, if anything, I don't know that it's going to get you anything more than just maybe higher angel share.
Yeah.
But the lower, the higher the angel share, the less liquid that's standing, the more you're going to intensify flavor. So, yes, you're going to probably get a different character, but it's going to come at an expense of yield.
Yeah.
And so unless it's a real positive to character, don't do it.
Right.
Because all you're doing is driving expense into the product.
Right.
And if there's no return of quality and better drinking experience, then you wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a pontoon and I go to the lake. So if you ever want to try,
strap a barrel on the back and bounce it around and everything.
Will that be our next Infinity project?
Right. We'll do that. Yeah.
So and there's over in Trimble, Tennessee, the what are their names? I can't think of their name. The saloon guys from South Dakota.
I don't know.
So Jesse James Dupree, he's got like a saloon. They have a saloon chime. Michael Ballard. So they have one
Is
of the
that
big,
the party, the one that does Party Batch, or no?
No.
So they're up in Trimble, Tennessee. So they have a small distillery there. So one of them does like a clear spirit to sell to the bikers out during the Sturgis rally, and the other one does the mature whiskey.
Oh yeah.
So so
Buffalo
like saloon
Chip?
chime,
Buffalo
and
Chip.
it was like Jesse James Outlaw bourbon or something like that. Okay, but part of their story was that he wanted to store the barrels beside the railroad tracks. Not that we haven't had a recent experience of ourselves, but I'm not sure that the vibration that we got off of that train passing by here a minute ago is enough to really change the maturation environment. But he wanted that for his story, and I'm like, knock yourself out. I would tell you this. I think it is important that a brand have a story.
Sure, absolutely.
Because you want to drink that in as part of the experience. That's why we have the one that we call the seismic rye. The reason I called it seismic rye is there's a seismic monitoring station in Townsend in Tuckaleechee Cavern. They called it AS 107. So I'm like, I'm going to make this rye 107 proof, and I'm going to call it seismic rye because it's supposed to kind of rye is supposed to have a little bit of a shock value. I always say that you can put a soft rye out, but why? Because rye's their whole reason for existence is to be a heavyweight.
Right.
If you're kind of looking at the world of like boxing or something like that, don't put out a flyweight rye because anybody who's shopping rye is looking for a heavyweight. They're looking for something higher proof and with a punch. So don't disappoint. There's other categories that if you want to do something soft that you'll do it in, but I wouldn't do it in the rye space.
Right.
And I've had the seismic rye, and it's delicious. So you tell
like I said, that one's been very popular for us. It's not necessarily my particular favorite, but once again, if I feel like something is nice, I'm trying to put things out there that appeal to people whose palates might be different than mine.
Sure.
We're actually working on some new spirits now. We had quite a few barrels that were made here over the years, different grain bills. That we're sorting through some older stuff, some 4-grain and some things I think could be very interesting, but it's not going to be just my opinion of it. I'm trying to assemble about 20 people who will at least occasionally drink bourbon And everybody's opinion matters. You know, I'm not going to weight my own opinion more than anybody else's, but I would like to know which one has the most mass appeal.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to present 5 models to you, tell me which ones are the top 2, and then let me kind of put my thinking cap on around those. And do I think that they're good to go as they are, or should I wood finish them? Kind of stay with our mantra of what we do, or is this the appropriate time to put one out that isn't wood finished? You know, so you're constantly kind of thinking through, from an innovation standpoint, what's next. Even brands like Jack Daniel's, it's not enough to be the #1 selling whiskey on the planet. Everybody's like, hey, I'm a big fan of your brand. What's next?
Yeah, right. No, I mean,
What's next?
Well, we'll volunteer as tribute, to help you with that.
Yeah, I should actually brought some samples here today. I ended up leaving them over in East Tennessee, but yeah, I've got some out with people right now. Everybody's kind of having a good time with it.
Nice.
Getting the chance to kind of, even if, as a novice or whatever, write these very flowery notes. I'm just like, you don't have to do all that. Just tell me. You don't have to tell me why. Just tell me, if I've got 5 samples, rank them in order. What was your favorite? What was your least favorite? Don't have to give me any rationale for it. It's, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But to that point of like, you mentioned Jack Daniel's, like it not being enough, right? And I feel like there's this evolution in the whiskey industry, and I feel it almost follows beer. If you look back at beer, and you've got this history of like, all of a sudden you now have all these craft beers, and they're just getting more and more. And you see that within the whiskey industry too. It's like, what's the next thing that we can do with whiskey? Keeps it creative, and
I absolutely agree with that, and I've told people that before, that we should have seen that people were going to start turning away from vodka and lighter spirits for darker, more flavorful spirits like whiskey and bourbon, because I think beer predicted it. For the longest time, drinkability or whatever that you would get from beer was defined by being light, and almost to the point that beer had become a commodity. I can maybe taste a little bit of difference, but if it's a Bud Light, a Miller Lite, or Coors Light, they're all very similar in character. And forever, that was the best-selling brands. Years ago, there actually were some flavorful beers in the market. A lot of them went to the wayside. They gave way to beers that were really kind of neutral and very, very soft. And then all of a sudden, that kind of started getting eaten into by these higher gravity, big beers, barrel-aged beers and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on. Beers have gotten way more interesting in the last 10 or 15 years, and I think that's kind of what you're seeing going on in whiskey today. It's not enough, and sometimes just to make a good distillate and let it come from a good barrel, you're seeing a lot of brands going after some of these odd wine cast finishes and stuff like that to kind of put some type of a unique spin on it, which I'm appreciative of that, because that's where I'm at least until I've got my own distillate that I feel like I can separate myself from the pack. I'm going to have to use something like that as our signature
To separate, yeah.
Yeah, it's a matter of whether it's a passion of mine or not. It's a necessity for now just to create a brand that has a unique characteristic of flavor. So
makes sense.
But
Where are y'all in that process of having your own distillate?
so we have, of course, this still right here. We've committed it. It's a pretty capable system. This is a 100-gallon Alembic still, but we have aspirations with Ghost Rail Gin that's produced here. So we're actually, I think I was telling you guys earlier, we just won gold for Ghost Rail Gin out in San Francisco, but we were also named the Gin Distillery of the Year for the state of Tennessee.
Congratulations.
In New York. Yeah, so, and proud that every drop comes from this small little footprint here in Thompson Station. So we have aspirations of growing gin. Gin is not as popular from a category standpoint. It's a smaller pool of people than what you see drinking whiskey and bourbon. But a lot of people really appreciate a good gin. So we want to, celebrate the fact that we feel like we've got a really nice gin to offer people who are into gin. And follow that up, I've got a barrel-aged version of it that should be coming out this summer, that I think will really, find its biggest appeal around the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, because I think when you smell it, when you taste it, it's kind of combining that pine and citrus that of gin with more of the vanilla and oak of a bourbon or a straight whiskey. But it smells like Christmas. I mean, that was some of the first thing that people would say. It reminds me of the holidays. It's all the smells of the store during the holiday season, and it's in the glass. So hopefully, when people enjoy that, even if they're not a gin drinker, maybe the person who's I'm a bourbon drinker, I don't drink gin, can kind of find that it's a step towards it. So
A little crossover.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun to see how it goes.
Yeah,
sounds
have that back in the market.
What will the proof on that be? Same 88?
88.
Okay.
Real estate 88, because I feel like the mouthfeel is right. We actually, the liquid that goes into the barrels, for the heirloom gin is actually, it has a little bit heavier tail cut on it, which is a little bit heavier on the botanicals even. A little bit fuller mouthfeel. We feel like that works well with the barrel because the barrel can soften some of those initial character notes. So it's a fuller, richer drinking experience, plus the notes of the barrel coming in on it. So that's kind of cool. Be having that coming out. Got a vodka brand. You know, we were talking earlier. You know, leaving Jack Daniel's, my aspirations weren't to create another Jack Daniel's, but really the parent company of Jack Daniel's was Brown-Forman, and they had some really nice premium spirits. They had Woodford Reserve, Old Forester. They had, they forged gin. So they've been on Herradura tequila. So they had some nice spirits in almost all these different categories. And it's like, within the realm of what we can do in America, in our facilities, I want to make a little bit of everything. We make beer, we make flavored spirits, we make vodka, we make gin. We're going to make, barrel aged gins. We're going to make whiskey. We're going to make bourbon. We're going to do a little bit of everything. As long as we like it, we hope everybody else does.
Yeah.
We're just going to have a good time with this. So.
Very cool. What other questions do you have?
So let me see here. Tell me a little bit about what is y'all's first recollection of being a bourbon or a whiskey fan? Where was that? When did the switch flip for you guys? Because I'll tell you, for me, I started out like most people. I started out drinking beer. When I was in college, I had a roommate who was much more into bourbon than I was. But if I was going to go out with him, that's what we were going to drink. So I became more and more a fan of it because, and I love this guy too. He's a great guy. He's a lawyer, and I don't hold that against him, but a really good guy. But yeah, that's when I remember tasting bourbon. And I remember my granddad. My granddad was a big drinker of it. But as an adult, I had not explored it until we'd just be sitting around talking about life, trying to get our degrees, what we were going to do when we get out of school, sipping on some bourbon while we talked about it. And that's what made me a fan of it. Next thing I know, I'm a Tennessee Squire. Yeah. But so where was it for you guys?
I can jump in. I remember very vividly. My wife makes fun of me all the time because she says, I have a terrible memory and I wouldn't even remember that we got married if I didn't have pictures for it. But in bourbon and cigars, those are memories that are created by sharing those with friends and close family members. But mine was, I worked with my dad, and so whenever we would make a sale on a building, we would celebrate with a cigar and something to drink. And it started out with beer, and then it transitioned over into rum. Because rum and cigars was kind of a natural pairing. But, as your palate begins to change and rum was getting too sweet for me, I started looking at bourbon. I remember it was probably 10 years ago, walking into the store and an E.H. Taylor single barrel caught my eye just because of the tube and it was on the top shelf, but it was like $50-something. And I remember saying to myself, man, that's a lot of money, to spend on a bottle of bourbon. But finally, after a few weeks,
now you'll say, I'll take the whole case.
I'll take it.
I'll take the whole case.
But I remember finally pulling the trigger and saying, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna buy that bottle. And I took it home, and it was a fall afternoon, and I went outside on the back porch and I opened it up, and unfortunately I put an ice cube in the glass, but I poured some of that single barrel over it, and I took a sip of it, and my eyes opened up. I was like, what in the world is this? And then, as my wife would say, unfortunately, I went down that path and have been there ever since.
Yeah. So I was always a Jack and Coke. And then I was like, man, I'm real fancy now. I'm drinking Jack with Sprite, But I'd way over consume. And so and my wife, we were bringing wives up. She got really nervous when she started seeing me bringing bottles of bourbon home. Because she was like, she knew me from the past, younger days when when you're drinking it mixed, it just goes down so fast. But this transition to just sipping on it and having a glass and sipping it over a period of time, and then maybe pouring another one or two, and that's it. And it's more about the enjoyment of the spirit than it is about where it's going to take you in a mindset. And sharing bottles with my dad was always has been a really fun thing to do as well, because it's fun I got into bourbon a little bit ahead of him, and so now when he comes to my house, he's like, "Hey, what have you got?" And I'm like, "Dad, anything in the house, it's open. If it's not open, we'll open it. Whatever you want to drink, we'll get to it." And it's just fun to share with people.
Sure.
Funny, similar, except a little more healthy. I did Jack and Diet Coke, and so that was like, earlier on. It's funny I really did start down that path, and I also drank. I was a beer guy. I've always been a beer guy, still am. But Jack, Diet Coke, and that just naturally evolved over time to where I was like, you know what? Let me start as I got a little bit older and everything. I was like, let me start trying some of this just by itself, or a little ice or whatever. Yeah. And it was Jack, and then it graduated to Gentleman Jack, and then Woodford. And I think if you ask a lot of people, that's going to be the natural progression for a lot of people. And then, eventually it became, let me try this bottle that I'm not familiar with. Let me try a little bit of higher proof. Let me try, and then, now I'm like, hey, give me that 127 proof, whatever,
Testing the waters now.
But I mean, it's all about, and again, I think, people should understand that come into trying bourbon for the first time, especially, like, that's what it's about. I mean, it's like finding your way to what you like best and how you like to drink it the best.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to say it was Jack and Coke, and then it was Jack and Coke. And then it was ice or neat. And then so there's this evolution that kind of comes out of that you're drinking it more for the spirit and the quality of it. Don't drink it for quantity as much as you do quality.
Absolutely.
I think that's for most of us, I hope we can get to that point that you're still not going at it like to your point, because I think you can drink spirits at a point where it's like you can really knock it out. Yeah. And hopefully people have learned a responsible way to consume it.
I tell my wife I have a buying problem, not a drinking problem, because we buy too much and we consume, or you should consume, less than what you are buying. But
if I had a drinking problem, it wouldn't be pouring out of the cabinet, right?
So if you guys are guessing, how many bottles at your house?
So I'll tell you this story. I have I was at a Chamber of Commerce event in Murfreesboro, and I'd had a shelf break recently, and I didn't lose any bottles, but I had to fix a shelf, so I had it all pulled out. And my wife had been on to me for a while, man. You got more than you need, and so somebody said to me, man, I bet you have enough bourbon that you could probably go a year without having to buy a bottle. And I said, well, I just counted them all, and if I drank a fifth a week, I could go 4 years. I was like, I'm good. So I've really backed off on what I'm buying now and trying to just work. Because I'll tell you, every bottle that I have at the house, when I bought it, I was excited to try it. And I try to keep about 7 to 10 bottles open at any given time. But my intention is to get to all of them. Yeah, and I can't wait until I do. So it's that's my story. Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 bottles.
Oh, wow.
I don't even want to go after you.
No, go ahead. I don't know how many.
He's got storage units. No, I'm just kidding. I've got about 100. It's not a huge collection, but it's typical. All of them are open. I keep it rotating. Like it's usually always 100. Yeah. And I mean, they're just all open because I share a lot. I'm like, if you come over, you're drinking some whiskey, so, but this guy's got us beat. I mean,
I have probably 500 or more, and they are a little bit of everywhere in the house, behind closed doors, out in the open. But I have a friend, who, if I'm chasing him, I'll never catch up to him. So that makes me feel a little bit better.
I think most people would be disappointed if they came to my house at how little I have. But one of the things I learned is that if you have a professional mover, they're not taking alcohol.
No.
So be careful. You may have to rent your own U-Haul just to take your bottle collection if you ever get reassigned or have to move somewhere. But I do have a car full. I do know that because the moving company wouldn't touch it. So I had to box it all up and put it. I had to carry it myself. So it was a car load.
I'll have to.
But a lot of mine aren't open. They were bottles that they were special bottles that I remember from Jack Daniel's and wanted to. I didn't save everything from back in those days, but there were some that I have some very fond memories of being a part of the team that created it. Meeting the Sinatra family, his children, and spending some time around them and getting to know them and kind of feeling like you had some insight into him.
Is there an intention to open those bottles, or is it just like they're forever
I would say. Nothing sacred at my house. Okay. So I've got a Sinatra Century, I've got the regular Sinatra. I've got some bottles that were like 10 years old that only went to the family, the Brown family, things of that nature that were just kind of cool to be a part of those that were behind the scenes. Special bottlings we did just for our employees. That basically celebrating the cooperage, hitting a birth date or something like that. So all those to me have special memories because I can remember us all celebrating all those milestones internally. But anyway, so I can see we're getting flashed out here. So it's time for us to wrap this thing up. But I just want to thank you guys for being a part of this day. It's been a real pleasure getting to know y'all better and to learn a little bit more about what makes you passionate about bourbon. So for anybody who's listening today, if they are in the Murfreesboro area and kind of in your target geographical area, how would they reach out to you and potentially join your club?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main page is on Facebook. It's just Boro Bourbon Club. We've also got an Instagram page. It's more or less for just posting some pictures and following. But yeah, follow us on Facebook, join the group. You'll see we've got a lot of stuff coming up. And we're partnering with a nonprofit. We do an annual big fundraising event where a lot of distilleries and a matter of fact, I think you all are coming, breweries that'll come and a 5-year celebration coming up, a beer release that we did in partnership with Cedar Glade Brews. So a lot of stuff coming up. So I would invite you to join the group so that you can start becoming part of that.
Very good.
If I can, real quick, I'd say that beer is being released on June 14th, which is National Bourbon Day.
Right.
And so that Friday at 3:00, we're going to the brewery opens at 4, and on that day we're going to open it up at 3:00 for the brewery's Mug Club members and for the Boro Bourbon Club people to be able to come.
Okay,
in
and which
and buy
brewery?
that. It's at Cedar Glade Brews.
Okay.
It's just, if you know Murfreesboro, if you're watching this in your local, it's right behind Chewy's off of Broad Street. And but it's a barrel that it was a club pick from the Boro Bourbon Club. That's kind of the tie-in. So the Boro Bourbon Club did this pick, and we took and got that barrel over to the brewery, and we brewed an Imperial Kentucky Common Ale and let it rest in that barrel for about 4 months.
Nice.
And we're really excited about it.
Good deal.
I don't have anything to add.
All right. Well, good deal. So, hey, everybody, thank y'all for tuning in this week. Hope you've enjoyed getting to know these guys. And if you're in the Murfreesboro area, that you'll be reaching out to them and joining their club. But until next time, Distilling Greatness, and we're out.